So we do have level metric. So we discussed about simple, compound, smart, and derived. So generally, any metric, any metric calculation takes place generally across the report level, like aggregation. So when it comes like aggregation, like metric calculation or metric aggregates across the report level. So we have a concept called as level metric, where if we want to aggregate the same metric across different level, we can prefer level metric. So let me showcase an example first. Let's create or let's edit the existing metric. So when you click on this level dimensionality, we have target, filtering, and grouping. But if you can see, the default is like report level. So default is report level, and we have standard and standard. So we'll discuss about what is target, what is filtering, and what is grouping. So, but this is what level. Basically, the default level is report level. Report level is nothing but whatever the objects present in the report, objects in the sense whatever the attributes present in the report, the metric aggregation takes place across that specific level. So, but if you want to go for some percentage calculations, or if you want to do some calculations, right? So we can prefer level metrics across different level. So we can prefer level metrics. Let me showcase that. Right click, new metric. So let's create a report first. So I will come back to that, because I will just create a basic report so that we'll know what level we need to calculate. So let's take product hierarchy. We have category. We do have subcategory, matrix, profit. So let's execute here. As you know, the default aggregation, we have seen that in the previous class, like the dynamic aggregation concept, it's the same. Now default, it is this profit is calculating across the lowest level. Lowest is like it will consider category and subcategory. Yeah. Yes, big, but here it's a parent and child. So if you remove category, it's no, like we don't have any changes, because it's a kind of a parent and child relationship. So when you place category here, so we are going to differentiate, we can differentiate across different category wise sales. But the thing is, now this aggregation, yes, this is aggregating across subcategory along with category, but I want to aggregate across category level. You know, category level in the sense, when you perform dynamic aggregation, so what is the value of books 569278, or electronics, movies, and music? So whenever you're going to place subcategory as well, so I want to get the actual value of books. So we know like books value is like, let's apply subtotals. We'll get some clarity on this data. So we have profit value. This aggregation is happening across subcategory and along with category. Anyhow, that's the report level. But I want to create a metric where I want to get, let's say I want to capture grand total. Grand total, you know, like this is the grand total. If you have grand total across each and every row, then we can perform row level calculation for percentage of total, something like that. Profit divided by grand total into 100 will get a percentage of total. Or if you want to calculate across different level, that is what category level, then we can also make sure like we need to get the aggregation across category level. So I will showcase step by step so that we'll get some clarity. So we have few of the options where basically when it comes like level metric, we do have target, filtering, and grouping. Let's place profit. So level metric is not a compound metric. Okay. So we'll first use fact. We are not going to use any metric. Level metric is a simple metric. Okay. Then we are going for a level. Let's pull a fact and go back to level dimensionality. So by default, we are getting a like report level. So let me remove this report level. Now in my report, I do have category and subcategory. So by default, we are getting the lowest level, that is what subcategory. But as I said, if I want to get the aggregation across the parent level, that is what category level, what I'm going to choose is, so I will choose category as a level. Okay. So we'll place category as a target. So my target aggregation, like I want to aggregate across category level. That is what my target. So we have filtering and grouping. And when you click on this drop down, we have few of the options where standard, absolute, ignore, and none. And for grouping, we do have standard, none. And we have few of the options. We don't use most of the cases these beginning of fact, end of fact, and beginning of lookup and end of lookup. So I didn't see any of the requirement on this, but still, yes, we can test. But I have seen, I tried a lot of cases. We are getting the same result as standard or none. So we have tried in certain cases. But yeah, so importantly, we'll go for standard and none. Okay, that is very important for grouping. You know, grouping, it will impact, let's say when you compare grouping to the SQL level, it is something like group by. Filtering, you know, its impacts and where clause in the SQL. In MicroStrategy filtering, we have a concept called as filtering, and grouping is nothing but a group by clause in SQL level. So this is what target, filtering, and grouping. So let me create a sample, this particular level metric, and we'll place in the report so that you'll get so we'll get those results. So let's say I'm using category CAT. I'm just using a particular order where what is the target category. Filtering, I'm using ST standard underscore, or you can use S standard underscore, grouping standard. So remember that first one is target. CAT is nothing but categories target. What is filtering? Standard. Third one is grouping standard. I'm just using a shortcut to remember that. Okay, category standard standard. Okay, so let's save. So I just created a level metric. Let's go back to metric, sorry. And we have category standard standard. Double click. So now when you look into the data first, so we are getting the data across category level aggregation. You can see books total value, this total, whatever this book subtotal value is similar to category standard metric value. So you are getting the same result. So across each and every subcategory level for books, you are getting the same result as the actual value of books. And for electronics, whatever the subtotal value for electronics, so you're getting the same result here for each and every row. And similar to movies, you're getting the same data. That means my metric is aggregating across category level. So each and every category, books, electronics, music, and movies and music. So how can we validate whether this is correct or not? It's a simple example. Okay, so yes, we are getting subtotal properly. This is one thing. And you can perform dynamic aggregation. Whenever you are going to move this subcategory from report template to report objects, these two results has to be same. And I can see we are getting same data. That means now this profit is aggregating across category level. And anyhow, we have set this category standard, right? Our target is category, correct? So we created a level metric that, hey, I want to aggregate this particular metric across category level. Anyhow, we are getting a default aggregation across, that is what for level metric, the aggregation is taking place across category level. And for profit, it will take the report level. So you are getting the lowest level of granularity, that is what subcategory level. Clear? Or any questions here? So I will explain each and every point we have different options like target, filtering, and grouping. But at least, um, any questions on this level metric? Can you hear me? I think you were in a mute, or not sure.
Sorry, I can hear you. Yeah, I was in mute.
Yeah. So let me create a new folder and let's move these other metrics to this folder, so that we'll have only level metrics. And similarly in reports as well. So let me choose only level metric. That's okay. So we'll go for level metric. So let's go for metrics. So this is category standard. But as I said, for level metrics, yes, we can aggregate across different levels. So aggregation, different level dimensionality you have seen, right? So in metric editor you have seen level dimensionality. So that is what attribute, whatever the level dimensionality. So what we have to choose that as a target. So let me create another metric. So because as I said, if you want to capture grand total, so let's see what is the possible ways we can capture the grand total. So I just use sum of profit, go back to level dimensionality, remove the report level, and default, yes, we are going for category level. But if you are not going to use grouping as standard, or let's say if you're going to set grouping as none, that means I'm not going to perform any aggregation. If grouping is none, I'm not going to prefer any aggregation. I will discuss about standard or like filtering. What is filtering and what are all the options we have. So we'll discuss on that. But if you are going to set grouping as none, so let's save and close this category underscore filtering filter
One
as.
question, Ramesh.
Yeah,
So in SQL, it will not allow to, I mean, like if you are doing some aggregate functions, you definitely have to give group by, right?
correct.
So here, will it allow?
Like basically in MicroStrategy point of view. So let me close this. So let's go for no. Basically, the point is whenever you are going to execute a report, we do get a SQL, okay? And based on the aggregation, if you are going to use sum, right? If you have sum of whatever the fact, you should get a group by, correct? That's a default MicroStrategy functionality. So that's
Yeah.
what my point. So whenever you are going to choose that group by is none, group by is none is nothing but I don't want to perform any aggregation across any level for that specific metric. Okay. So let me showcase that. So that means, so it's internally within the MicroStrategy point of view for that specific metric calculation. So that means it's the same, right? So if for this category standard grouping is standard. So this grouping is calculating across only category level, not category and subcategory. For profit, so if you can look into the profit, it will calculate across subcategory level. So let's see group by subcategory level. This is what profit. Okay. Or if you want to know the proper naming convention, so let's edit this metric. Generally for metrics, we don't get proper alias names. So advanced settings. And if you want to know, if you want to use proper naming convention, profit. This is profit. Okay. I click edit. this helps a lot in SQL level, so you can compare what actual metric it is. Because of these temporary table names, temporary column names, it's not possible to identify in few cases. So let's say this is level metric or LVL underscore empty underscore category standard, or you can also make use of simple naming convention level metric LM category standard. Let's save and close. Save the report. So right click and view SQL straight away. Now you can see here for profit, the aggregation is taking place across subcategory level. Okay, that is the lowest level. Subcategory is the lowest level, correct? So that is what, like, we are getting the data across lowest level of granularity. So now you can see this LM underscore category underscore standard. You can see the aggregation is taking place across category level. Simple. It's very clear that for level metric, it is aggregating across category level. For normal metric profit, it is aggregating across subcategory level. Okay, let's go for, you can see now in the grid view where you can see the profit is aggregating across subcategory level. That's the lowest level. Because of this parent and child, this is the lowest level. And you can see this category and standard. That's what level metric is aggregating across category level. Clear?
Yeah.
Let's go back. Now let's use category standard and none. Whenever you're going to put grouping as none, it's simple. Let me execute. So let's execute and let's check the report. So we are just discussing about only grouping here. I'm going to use filtering. We'll choose filtering after this particular concept. So now for whenever you're going to choose grouping as none, you're getting grand total. Initially, we preferred about subtotal across that specific level. So you
Okay.
can see now
It's
we
a
are getting grand
grand
total.
total.
Yeah, it's not aggregating. So it's grouping is none is nothing, but it's not aggregating across any level. That's what the point here.
Okay.
So how it helps in the sense, you can calculate profit divided by category underscore standard underscore standard underscore that's what filtering as standard and grouping as standard. Now the like you are calculating across each and every category wise percentage calculation. And if you want to calculate overall percentage of total, then we can choose the other one, like grouping as none, because sales divided by grand total, and this is sales divided by subtotal. There's the difference, right? So that's what the advantage of level metrics. So purely it helps a lot for a percentage calculation across different level. So one is at grand total and one is at parent level, so category level. So as I said, we have for level metric, we have target, filtering, and grouping. So target, you can use any particular dimension or whatever the attribute. That's what level dimensionality. So you can choose a target. And filtering, we do have standard. And grouping, we do have standard. So whenever you are going to use filtering as standard, filtering options are very important because grouping standard and none, it's simple. Grouping is none, it's non-aggregate metric. Standard, it is going to aggregate. But filtering as standard, it will consider the filter. So whenever you're going to choose filtering as standard, it will consider the filter. That's what, like, I have two reports open here. Let's close this. So let me showcase that. Let's edit. Let's save first. Let's edit the report. So if you want to choose a local filter, you can choose, or if you want, you can go for standalone filter. No worries about that. So let's double click. So now I'm going to choose a filter. So this is important. So filtering options are important. So now let's say I'm going to apply filter condition on top of subcategory. For each and every category, I'm going to pick two elements. Okay, two subcategory elements. Let's say for books, I'm going to use business and literature, and for electronics you can prefer cameras and computers, and for movies you can see action and drama or comedy, and music you can pick pop and rock. I just applied I'm applying a filter condition for each and every category. I'm picking couple of subcategories. Okay, and let's apply the filter so that we'll check how it works whenever we are going to set filtering as standard. So let's save and close and re-execute level metrics report. So it has to consider the filter, yes. So we have chosen only, like, let's say F11 function F11, sorry, function F11. So I just removed all the subtotals and grand totals. Now let's just look into the data first. So now you can see profit value, it's the lowest level. So for each and every category, we are getting subcategory values. For books, we have only two subcategories: electronics 2, movies 2, and music 2 records. So now let's apply grand total first, so that we'll check how whether this total is correct or not correct. So let's go for F11 shortcut is the grand total. So the grand total for category like category standard, whatever the grand total for category standard, that is the result for category standard none. Remember, whatever the option we are going to use, for category standard, grand total value is the result for category standard none, or any, like we have standard, absolute, ignore, and none. So whatever the standard like grand total value, that's the output for none. Okay, so now the point here is, let's apply subtotals first. So now we have applied a filter, the books total value 147260, because this is aggregating across category level, that is what category books. So you are getting 147260. This is correct. And for electronics, camera plus computers, you are getting here. And for movies, action plus comedy, you're getting 70,000 plus. The subtotal values it's reflecting here. For music, it's the addition of these two. And whatever the total value of category standard, that's the actual result for category standard and none. So that means, simple, whenever you are going to choose filtering as standard, then it will consider the filter condition. Okay. It will consider the filter and we are going to get that specific result. Any questions here?
No. I'm good.
So we have, as I said, we have different options like standard, absolute, ignore, and none. Very important thing is like absolute and ignore. I need to create a separate report to showcase the difference here, but let's go for absolute metric creation. What is absolute and how it helps? So let's go for metrics. Right click, new metric. Profit, and go back to level dimensionality and remove this report level. I'm choosing the same level. Okay, so let's go for category, and here in place of standard you can select absolute, and let me go for grouping as standard. So we'll create category absolute standard, category absolute, and none. So we'll go for two combinations. For filtering absolute, we have standard and none. Okay, so this
Okay.
is category, absolute, and standard. And if you want to create, let's edit category, absolute, standard. So now let me go back to level dimensionality. I'm going to select none, and now file, save as, category, absolute, none. So now I just created a category absolute none and category absolute standard. Let's place in the report. For differentiation, I will come back to that. Differentiation between absolute and ignore. So let's edit. Go back to public objects metrics, category absolute standard, and I'm going to place both the metrics, absolute standard and absolute none. Let's execute. So just concentrate on absolute standard. If you can see the results between absolute category absolute standard and category absolute, category standard and category absolute standard. Category standard consider the filter, and we are getting only those aggregated results of these two subcategories. That's what the total of business and literature. Whatever the data you're seeing in the report, that's the output for category standard. But category absolute is nothing but actual value. That's it. Just remember, absolute is nothing but actual value. What is the actual value of target? What is the target books? What is the actual value of books? 569,278. What is the actual value of electronics? 4289603. So we are going to get actual value of target. That's the category. Okay, so this is what the advantage. But why it is not considered the filter? Because we have already the filter. The concept is whether absolute metric will consider the filter or not. That's a simple question. Generally it will consider the filter, but if it considers a filter, why it is not filtering out the data, why we are getting the actual value? That is what the concept of level metric. Okay, so generally we are going to get the filtered values. We are not getting all the subcategory results like 24 elements. We are getting only those 8 elements, but we do get actual data. It consider the filter, it will filter out the data, but we are going to get the actual data of target. That is what books, this is the books actual data.
Yeah.
So as I said, absolute standard grand total value will be the absolute none result. So absolute, like category standard total value will be the output for category standard none. So similarly, for absolute standard total value is the result for absolute none. So because it is not going to aggregate, it's a non-aggregate data. Okay.
So in standard, it will consider the filter, and in absolute, it will not consider the filter. That is a difference, right? Main difference.
No, it will consider the filter, but it will give absolute value. That's the actual
Yeah.
value.
The calculation, it is not considering the
Correct.
filter.
Yeah, that's true. In the calculation, it is not going to consider the filter, but
It's going to
yes,
give
in
the,
the
yeah.
report level, it will filter out the data, but in the
Yeah.
calculation, it is not going to consider the filter. So we will get actual value of books.
Yes.
So, and ignore is also the same. So generally we do get a lot of confusion over the difference between absolute and ignore. Let me showcase that. So let's create metrics first, then I will differentiate. It's a very simple differentiation. I will differentiate ignore versus absolute. So let's go for new metric, or let's use existing metric as well. Category absolute standard. So let's double click. So now I need to use ignore standard, file, save as, ignore standard. So now let me go back to here, ignore none, save as, ignore none. So I have ignore none and ignore standard. I just created those two metrics. Let's go back to report editor, public objects, metrics, ignore standard, ignore none. If needed, I will remove few of the metrics. If it is fine, then we'll compare all the results. But if you
Fine.
if you want to remove, we'll place in
It's
report objects. Okay. So we have absolute none and absolute standard. We have seen this. Now you can see, you can compare absolute standard results versus category ignore standard. So absolute standard and ignore standard is same. Okay. So absolute standard and ignore standard is same. Absolute none and ignore none is same. So now, yes, it's same. Like, you don't worry about how the calculation, I will showcase that. But just remember, ignore and absolute results are same. The functionality is different. Absolute functionality is different. Ignore functionality is different. As we know, absolute will consider the filter, but we are going to get same actual data. Ignore, it is not going to consider the filter, but we are going to get actual data. That's the difference between absolute and ignore. But as I said, I need to create a separate report to differentiate absolute versus ignore. I will do that now. Okay. So, and we have one more metric called as none and none. It's a non-aggregated metric. So it's not much important, but let me showcase, because for none and none, it's almost similar to category standards, none and none, it's same result. So let me showcase that. Let me create none and none. I'm not going to use none standard. That's not a good practice to go for none and standard. If it is none and none is called as non-aggregate generally. Let me create a metric. But I will showcase the difference between absolute and ignore. That is very, very important. So level dimensionality, we have category, none, none. Category, none and none. So let's execute. So if you can see, category standard none and category none and none, it's the same result. Okay. So now we'll compare absolute versus ignore. Yeah. So how this calculation takes place. Let me create a separate report for this, or let's create save as. Okay, absolute versus ignore. So let's remove all these metrics. So now I have a filter in my report. Okay, I do have category, subcategory, profit, and let's use absolute standard. Don't consider absolute none, so it's not required, because I need to test absolute standard versus absolute ignore standard. Okay, category absolute standard versus category ignore standard, because as you know, we are going to get same result. But I said right, so category absolute standard will consider the filter, but we are going to get actual data. That's what happening here. Okay, so category absolute standard is considering the filter, but you can see, like, this is a different criteria. Okay, so I cannot say like, why should we remove profit to prove that, okay, this is absolute and this is ignore. Uh, we have different functionalities in MicroStrategy. We have few of the dependencies. I'm not exactly sure like why this metric to metric calculation is behaving, but now I will showcase the exact uh, solution for this. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove profit. Okay, we are getting 8 records, irrespective of totals, subtotals. We are getting 8 records. Now I'm going to remove profit. Okay, this is very interesting. Let's remove profit from the report. What is happening here is we discussed that absolute will consider the filter and we are going to get the actual value. But here, when I remove profit metric, I'm getting all the records, all the subcategory records. But I said for absolute, it will consider the filter. So now the only proof we do have is SQL. Go back to SQL view. If you can see the SQL, like if you can see the filter condition in the SQL, then we can consider, or we can confirm that, okay, this will consider the filter, at least here. Okay, if we have any where clause in the SQL, yes, absolute will consider the filter. Okay, this is the only proof. Getting right? So now you can just remember for only absolute metric, still you can see the filter condition. But whenever you are going to remove that existing profit metric, yes, we are not getting the filter applied here. I'm not exactly sure what is happening here with the profit and the other metric. But yes, I can tell that, okay, absolute will consider the filter. Now let's remove this. Let's remove absolute metric. Let's use ignore standard. We have filter in the report. So let me showcase in the design mode. We need to confirm, right? So we have filter. So let's execute the report. I don't have profit metric. Let's go back to SQL view and just check whether you have filter condition or not. Here, no. And here, no filter. And here also in the final pass, we don't have any filter. So for ignore, it is ignoring the filter. Simple point. Ignore is nothing but filtering. Ignore is nothing but it is ignoring the filter condition. Okay, absolute it will consider, but yes, we have a different criteria. Yes, it will consider the filter, but we are going to get actual data. Filtering is also like it is filter. In case of filter, it is going to ignore the filter, but we are going to get the actual data. That's the only difference. Absolute, it will consider the filter. Ignore, it will ignore the filter. None is a non-aggregate metric. That's what the actual difference between absolute and ignore. Any questions here?
No, Ramesh.
Yeah. So this is what level metric. So we do have, so we have these options, like you can see, of category as a target. We used filtering and grouping. These three options are very important. Actually, we have the only intention is like target. This is similar to level of details in Tableau. So target is like level of details fixed. I want to aggregate across category level. That's what the target. Level metric is similar to level of details. Okay. So target, I want to aggregate across different level. That is what I'm going to use category as my target. But if you want to consider the filter, we have all these options in one single metric. But in Tableau perspective, if you want to consider the filter or not, we have an option where we can choose those filter conditions. So we have those specific options. Anyhow, we don't worry about grouping in Tableau perspective. So because aggregation or not non-aggregation, we are performing across target level. That's what we are doing anyhow. So like that is what the advantage in level metric, where we have filtering as standard, absolute, ignore, and none. So where we have few differentiations. Standard, it will consider the filter absolute, and ignore, we are going to get the same result. Yes, there is a difference between these two in terms of SQL, but it's the same result we are going to get when it comes like the metrics point of view. And we do have none as a non-aggregate metric. So any questions? Yeah,
No, Ramesh, I'm good.
yeah. Thank you.